Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 183, The Lost Word in Masonry. You know me, John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, we have Robert Johnson.
Hey everybody, RJ here, Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, where I am a past master, current sitting secretary, and other stuff. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Right Worshipful. Mike Hambrecht.
Hey, Mike Hambrecht here, Village Lodge, Burton, Ohio. I'm the current junior steward and LEO.
Thank you. Or should I say Mike the intern? I think it's the first time I've introduced you as Mike Hambrecht.
Yep.
It won't happen again.
Yeah, my apologies. And last but not least, Jason Richards.
Hey everybody, Jason Richards here, Worshipful Master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C., and recently returned from an excursion to the middle of nowhere, quite literally, Ohio.
Did you have fun?
I had a great time. I was had a blast up in Carroll Lodge in Carrollton, Ohio, and spent some time with some of the brethren from Lafayette Lodge, number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio, which was the lodge that my grandparents and great uncles all belonged to. So I had a really fun trip and enjoyed it quite a bit. So lots of good Masonic traveling going on this weekend.
Fantastic. All right. So into Masonic news this week. It's been a little light, but one thing that is late breaking news as of today at 4:30 p.m. Let me share my screen here. We have some news about the Albert Pike statue. We've talked about this in weeks past, but apparently this week, Norton will introduce a bill to remove the statue of Confederate General in Judiciary Square. That's right. D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton plans to introduce legislation to do just that this week with the blessings of the Freemasons themselves. So as
Dun.
Because the Pike statue was put there by an act of Congress, it has to be removed by an act of Congress. So despite what the DC Council wanted to do, they had no legal authority to do that. So apparently they've talked it over with many people, including the Freemasons. We'll find out who in a second, to introduce legislation to make it a congressional act. There's a little bit of skepticism in the article about, well, with politics and Congress and all that, will it actually get done? But that'll just be part of the process after the bill gets introduced. What I found interesting was that she met last week with representatives of the Freemasons who are supportive of the district's efforts to take down the statue. And I quote, "The Supreme Council of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Southern Jurisdiction, USA, will support an action by the District of Columbia to remove the statue forthwith, so that it shall not serve as a source of contention or strife for the residents of our community." And that is a quote from Sovereign Grand Commander Ronald Seal, who wrote in a letter to the council member Jack Evans.
That makes sense because, with our trying to keep harmony concept, we wouldn't want to be the source of people not, feeling good about something in their city.
Mm-hmm. Even later on, Albert Pike, he was not quoted. Art de Hoyos was quoted by talking about the history and how he's, as we mentioned earlier, he's really not dressed in his Confederate uniform, but more as a civilian and a Unionist at the end. But he did point out that the Freemasons don't own the monument. Since it was gifted to the government through the act of Congress, it is ultimately the legislator's decision on how to dispose of it. I mean, we talked about this as one option would be that the House of the Temple in DC just down the street from where the statue is, has some real estate in the back to actually host this monument on property they own, but they don't have a say in where this goes because it's technically government property now. It was gifted to the government. So we'll see. Any other thoughts on that? That exciting. Good to hear.
Well, it's interesting because when we were talking about the the Albert Pike episode, we did talk a little bit about the recent rash of calls to tear down these monuments to the Confederacy. And originally I was against kind of wiping the history off, and then I did a little bit more research and found that a lot of these monuments actually were put up in times of the civil rights movement and Jim Crow laws, as a visible symbol of white supremacy. And in that case, I say tear them all down. But if you look at the intent of the Albert Pike Memorial, again, as Brother Art de Hoyo said in the article, Albert Pike is depicted as a civilian holding a Masonic book. It's a memorial to his time as a Mason, not his time as a Confederate brigadier general. If you look at the intent, it doesn't match the intent of these other Confederate monuments, which was ostensibly to call attention to any sort of racial supremacy in a public setting.
Right.
But if folks want to tear it down, then go ahead.
And one thing, though, I'll say this is that the House of the Temple, whenever they would speak of that statue, though, they constantly made sure to point out that he was the only Confederate general to have a statue in the nation's capital.
It is a fact. That is a fact. Exactly. So it all depends on how you spin it. So we shall see. I'm sure we'll get lots of updates as this thing moves along, but there's a lot of other things going on in Congress right now. So we'll see how quickly that gets acted upon. We'll see.
It's not like they're trying to pass a budget, so
right, or aid to Puerto Rico or anything,
or a law in general. Any law, really.
They might prefer to try and work on this one than anything else.
It's a little easier.
Might be why we actually see some movement here.
Okay, let's get to our topic for the week, which is the lost word in Masonry. That's right. We're talking about a play on Masonic ritual in the sense that the joke that I heard as I was becoming more and more active as an officer was that the only true lost word in Masonry is the word no. Why? Because we want to join and join and join. Nick Johnson has his wallet, his Costanza wallet, full of dues cards, and Mike Hambrecht he's filling his up right behind Nick Johnson. And there comes a point in time where it's left for every man to determine how much is enough. And so tonight we'll talk about when is that breaking point, and do certain members of this panel have their breaking point already reached, and where are they going with some of their Masonic commitments? So let's see. Basically, let me start off and ask the rest of you, when would you personally say enough is enough? And I'm going to start with the sitting worshipful master, Jason Richards. When's enough in your eyes?
The afternoon of December 9th of this year is when I will say enough is enough.
What happens then, Jason?
My successor is presumably elected and installed, and I relegate myself to the past master's row. So the issue with Masonry, as we all know, is that there's so much to do, there's so much to be a part of, and there's so much work to do for, frankly, a relatively limited membership numbers and further limited active membership numbers. And so it's very, very easy to lose yourself in the Masonic fraternity and forget, everything else, whether it be work, family, church, other obligations. So it's a constant balancing act, and unfortunately, the worshipful brother Drew Dodds and I were actually talking about this at breakfast today in middle of nowhere, Ohio. And we were like, if it wasn't enough that you know Freemasonry has so many opportunities to serve, and it has such a vacuum of good, solid leadership at all levels. You get peppered with these requirements as an officer, as a worshipful master. It's the, well, you don't have to go, but you kind of should, and all of these extra requirements just add up to the point where Drew and I were talking. We're having trouble getting young men into the officers lines um, across Masonry because there is so much crap that you have to do as an officer, as a worshipful master, that you have no business having to do. And there's that constant expectation of, well, if you're a good master, you're going to go around to every lodge's inspections. They have inspections in Ohio. Or if you're a good master, you're going to follow the district deputy grand master around to all of his official visits. You're going to go to all of the ritual schools. There are so many different Masonic obligations that just fill up your time as master, as a member, as an officer in a lodge. Where it's kind of like, if you go back to college, it's like the really amazing classes were the ones where the professor never needed to take attendance because you'd show up anyway. And the only classes where attendance was taken and reflected as part of your grade were the classes that frankly just weren't worth going to. And I think there's a lot of that happens in the Masonic fraternity today as well, where the Grand Lodge will put out something saying, oh, we need to go to, all make an attempt to go to these leadership events or these other things. And it's like, well, you realize the only reason that members aren't showing up to these events, outside of the fact that they have too much to do already, is that you are not making these events worthwhile to come to. And so, there's so much that you're obligated to do as an officer and as a member of a lodge. I think it's time, frankly, for especially the younger officers who have new families. And this is going to go directly against what Robert's going to say, I'm sure. I think it's time at this point for younger officers who have young families, who have jobs, who are working on their careers and other aspects of their lives to start saying, no, if it isn't explicitly, something that I have to do that I knew about before I started my year, it's not going to happen, or I will try my best to get to it. But if I don't make it, that's not an avenue for criticism, because we get a lot of rule by guilt and criticism for those masters that aren't able to show up to everything.
I was told that it was only one night a month.
I went in with a little more eyes open, and luckily my my spouse is rather accommodating, which is one of the reasons why I'm stepping back from just about everything next year, so that I can give her the time back that I wasted as master this year.
All right, Robert, what say you?
I wasn't done talking. No,
cut off the mic. Play the music.
Wrap it up. So first of all, I like how you said the time that you wasted as master.
I chose those words carefully because there's been a lot of time that I've put in as master that has been amazing and very worthwhile. But there's been a lot of wasted hours that I took away from my wife and son.
It's not very lean.
So how much is too much, I think is what we started with there. And when I think about how much is too much, I think too much is when you have to kind of ask yourself a couple of questions. One is how you feel mentally. Do you feel that going to all this stuff is still fun? Are you still having a good time doing it? Because if that's the case, then it's not time to quit yet. As long as you are having fun and you are meeting your obligations at home and at work and in Masonry, great. Just keep it going. But if you're at a point where you are constantly having to put in the work, and I'll say something controversial here. There is, the fact that a lodge took you in or that you became a Mason does not equate to an unpayable debt on your part. Meaning, don't consider it like you have to continually always give back to your mother lodge because they made you a Mason. No, quite the contrary. I have put in personally 9 years right after I got in. You know, I went all the chairs, was master, secretary. I'm in my second year. Excuse me, or I'm going into a second year. And that's fine. Like, I'm having fun. I'm doing it okay. But as far as secretary, I probably won't do it a fourth year. No, so this will be my second year. So I won't do it a third year, right? Like, this is my last year probably going to be secretary. And that's because I've personally had enough. Where we talk about what's wasted, as Jason put it, that is a great word, right? Recently, for the last 2 years, as a secretary, I have put together a newsletter, which was for my own lodge and had, like, you know, the did you knows and all this great stuff in it. And I would post it and send it out to 650 Masons in our area and post it on our Facebook page and all this, right? And if you use a service like MailChimp, it'll tell me how many times that was opened. Well, what I started to find out is that out of all these people, 7 people opened the file.
70 or
7 people. And so this is a lot of effort. Like, I would bust my ass like all the time to make sure this thing was live before and update the website. And it was live before our stated meeting so that all that stuff was there and we could announce it at the stated, hey, the newsletter's out, print it out, throw on tables, all this stuff. And the fact is, there's only 7 people read it, and only 2 or 3 of those people were from our lodge, and none of those people were active people at my lodge. And then as far, like, we can then continue that, right? So that's wasted time. I announced that I was going to stop doing it, and that's fine. And then I got to the point where I said, well, this is interesting. I wonder if anybody's actually, you know, we do this thing where we accept the minutes electronically every month. Somebody makes that motion. I make a motion that we accept the minutes as electronically submitted, regularly seconded. All those in favor, boom, passed, done. We don't have to read the minutes. When you do the work, then when we look at the MailChimp stuff, here's what I find. Out of 121, so we have 121 email addresses out of 270 members. That's a problem in itself. 121 emails. Out of those members who got that, the minutes were opened like 20% of the time. And of that 20% who are opening, only 4 of those people are people I see on a weekly basis. So I don't really have an option with minutes. I got to put them out, right? But that's also wasted time. Nobody cares. And that doesn't feel great. And so you want, as a person, to do something that matters. And so this is why we tend to take this course and we say we need to make sure that you are being fulfilled as a Mason also. And if you're not being fulfilled, then it's time to step back, move on, or take a break.
Cut bait.
I'm unfamiliar with that phrase, but it sounds great. So
No, the phrase "cut bait."
I've never
Fit.
heard it in my life.
Or cut bait.
So that's it though. Like I would say that next year I'll accept the nomination for secretary if it's made this year, and that's fine. But next year I won't. And anybody who says, "Well, you owe it," no, I don't. We sit along the sidelines, like people push and push, and there are people who carry lodges through tens of years to make sure things happen while people move through the chairs, and they assume that they're going to do something, and they never do because they just assume somebody else is going to pick up the slack. But I don't want to be that guy that enables that kind of quote unquote success. So that's why I'm probably stepping back, next year.
Okay. Mike Hambrick, how many things have you quit in Masonry?
The only thing that I'm going to be quitting is I'm actually no longer going to be junior steward. I'm not even going to stay in the officer's line.
I said that tongue in cheek, and actually you had an answer. So.
Yeah. But I am. I've let them know that I don't want to be in the officer's line, but I still am willing to continue to be their lodge education officer. So we'll see how that goes. If they want that or not, we'll see.
You know who also stepped way the heck out of his line? Jonathan Thomas Ruark.
Oh.
Ooh. Burn.
Did you? Oh.
Pour some water on that burn.
Yeah. However, as John was alluding to, though, I've also petitioned council, commandery, and just went through my first 2 Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction degrees.
So the net gain was positive. Okay.
Right. Now, as RJ was pointing out, though, about traveling with your DDGM and so forth, actually, that's something I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be going traveling around to inspections. Or Jason was one to talk about that. I'm sorry. Because it's in Ohio where we have the inspections, and I will be traveling with our DDGM to many of his inspections. He's actually a good friend of mine, and we were talking about that, and that was one of the things that helped me decide to just step away from being on the officer's line as well. So, because I would really rather get out there, see how other lodges do things, spend time on the sidelines in my lodge, and actually take my time, as I kept hearing but didn't want to do when I first joined. So, yeah.
Yep. Well, I joined the Royal Arch within 3 or 4 months of being raised and got my Royal Arch degrees. And I have been to 1 Royal Arch meeting in the 5 years it's been since I got my Royal Arch degree.
Well, so that brings up a good point. Really, I think what we're all kind of talking about when the right time is the return on investment, to use like an economics term.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Benefits exceed what you're putting in, whether it be just money or money and time or money and effort.
Yep.
And your energy, and even your psychological energy, right? The time you're devoting to your labors. And so that, again, doesn't have to be just dues, right? I mean, sometimes that is a financial decision for some people. Mm-hmm. I can't afford these other appendant bodies. We haven't even really talked about appendant bodies yet. But that, there may be a time where you just say, I'm not active. I'm not getting a lot out of it. And so it might be time to just, demit and pull out of that. And so, that's kind of the way I look at it is, although, we love Masonry, all of us here on the show. I know that I'm trying to free up some more time to spend more time with family and do more side projects. And so I need to step back from certain obligations, which means, attending lodge fewer times than normal. Maybe not necessarily giving up. And see, here's the thing too, to Jason's point. I mean, Jason's a life membership in perpetuity card hold carrier, sort of, for Royal Arch. I'm working.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. If they ever give me my dues card.
He's got a virtual card. But basically, there are degrees that I love in Masonry, but can I go out to every meeting? No, I can't. As a father of 4 young kids, I can't go to every meeting. But I don't want to give up that the access to that information, I guess is one way to put it. If I wanted to go to a Scottish Rite thing, or if I wanted to contribute in a Scottish Rite, we have a new Scottish Rite study club nearby. Great. That I want to be able to maintain my membership for that, and that I'm getting still value from, even though it's not active participation. But let's kind of transition into what are we going to stop doing. And I mean, for me personally, Jason alluded a little bit to his plans for next year, but for me personally, I'm not going to commit to any position or title in Patriot Lodge. I'm currently the Lodge education officer, and I've done a not so good job on that. I'll admit that. And I'm going to be. I just got out of the high priest chair, so I'm a past high priest at the Loudon chapter of Royal Archmasons, and so
current scribe.
So I've been, I've done my time, and so I think that's another point that I want to make, was that if you have obligations, stick to those obligations. Right? You made a commitment. Don't bow out of a commitment, because that's unfair to the brothers that have signed up for you to be there. I mean, RJ said it well. He's going to put his name in for another, or accept the nominee for one more year, if nominated, but he's going to let his decisions known far in advance for planning. I am the senior warden at the A. Douglas Smith Lodge of Research, one of the research lodges here in Virginia, and I informed the Merciful Master a couple months ago that 2018, I don't think I'll be able to move on. So I want to give him at least 6 months of planning to make sure I didn't leave him hanging. I did have a guy leave me hanging when I was planning my year in the East. It was October. We have elections in December.
You promised you wouldn't talk about that.
It wasn't you. But I had a guy who all through the calendar year as my year senior warden say, yep, I'm ready to be one of your line officers. And in October, late October of that year, said, I changed my mind. So, it's one of those things that if you have a Masonic obligation, a commitment, stick to your commitment, but make sure that your intentions are well known after that. So, so there we are. Robert, are there any other things that you are going to possibly say no to in Masonry?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I've already said no to a few things. We can't do all the things, like, right? We want to, you want to give back. There's always this possibility that your efforts will be appreciated, and that's what it's about, right? Is you talked about this return on investment. And there are a lot of guys out there, John, who are going to tell us, how dare you, because Masonry gave this thing to you. You shouldn't expect anything, and you get out of it what you put into it. If that were true, we wouldn't have this episode.
Well said.
And the thing is that you might get out of it what we put into it in a different level, I guess. When we do this show, I feel like I absolutely get out of Masonry what we put into it when it comes to podcasting, digital media, and getting out there, because on a national and on a global scale, we are able to converse with brothers all over, and that is so fulfilling in getting that education. But this isn't always the case at the local level, and we deal with for an organization that is as every Grand Lodge will sell you on this, that we are fledgling, that we're all, we've got, the numbers are dwindling, and the per capita needs to be raised, and dues need to be raised, all these things. There's just, there's a lot of problems, and we don't necessarily have the enthusiasm behind the organization to always, to bring it to the next level that they want it to be brought to. And when we look at these things, this return on investment, I feel that is so key. And so for me, you said something you just said a few minutes ago, which was, if you make a commitment, follow through. I actually had to break this just recently. I was the thrice illustrious master of my council, or the TIM, here in Illinois. They are separate organizations. So we have the Royal Arch and we have the Cryptic Council. They're totally separate. And I was the thrice illustrious master of the council. And I felt, for personal reasons, that I had to basically resign. And so I resigned, and I think there's like 7 or 8 months left. And it's unfortunate that I had to do that. Strictly selfish reasons on my part. For me, it wasn't a right fit, and it was a bummer that I had to do that. And but you have to be able to be happy, right? Like, when I think about what I personally was getting out of that experience, was not great, and some of it's due to the situation at the council, but it's also due to the way I see the problems or not the problems, but the situations and how I deal with them. I'm not good at dealing with those things that are going on, and I feel like that's just not my place to deal with it, and I don't want to be there, and I'm going to be selfish, and because I need to be happy, right? So being at home with my kids on a Tuesday night and making sure I'm at this show and here is, to me, more important. And so you have to make those sacrifices. What's more important? Where do you get your fulfillment from? And this is just one of those things. So I've stepped out of the TIM role like literally 5 days ago. And again, secretary next year, but after that, pulling out. People ask about long-term plans for DDGMs, because in Illinois you can serve as long as you want.
Wow.
Yeah. So my thing is,
That's frightening.
It kind of is. My thing is that I look at it like a talent map. So these guys who do come around to all the meetings with, we have a district team. I create a talent map, and hopefully I can pass that on to these guys and go, here's everybody that I have witnessed that has talent that you can put this district in the capable hands of. And by doing that, success will happen, and you won't revert to, kind of archaic, old school DDGM mentalities. So yeah, that's it.
Now, on the flip side, one thing I was going to bring up for Ham is, early on when Ham was considering going right into the Royal Arch, even barely a year raised, the rest of us are trying to give him some brotherly advice, going like, what are you, crazy? Like, slow down. And he's like, no, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And now he's in Scottish Rite as well. And it took me a while to really digest your answer. And so, Mike, what was your answer to us when we were kind of like, what are you, crazy? Like, stop with joining everything right away. You're too new.
Well, my biggest thing is, number one, I'm older than y'all. That's one. That's not a big deal, but it's true. Another thing is, my family is grown up. My daughter's in her 20s. I have the time to get away from my family. My wife has her own major hobby, which is our dogs. So there's something in this that I need to be able to do. Rather than sit around and be kennel help, as it were. I need something just that's about me. And that's really what this is for me, is, Masonry is that. And yeah, I was in Royal Arch within a month of my raising, and I got within, by the end of the summer when we went dark, I was actually master of the first veil. And I'm still in Royal Arch. I'm master of the third veil right now as well. So that I'm keeping. Hopefully I'll get to keep the lodge education officer posting. yeah, as you guys, as I just said, the Council, Commandery, and Scottish Rite. I'm also in the Ohio Lodge of Research and the Ohio Chapter of Research. So
You have a long way to go to get to your enough is enough moment.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's, obviously, I needed to step out of at least one officer's position just to make sure that I can travel around and do just lodge things and fellowship. That's the biggest reason I'm doing that. But honestly, I'm still having fun. I still looking for more fun. I know that a friend of mine is looking into, we've got Night Masons here in our area that I can ask to join rather than be invited. So we're looking at that. I don't think I'll do that. Join the Jesters, no. Because that has been
asked to do that.
Yeah, we have to join the shrine first anyway. And I'm on the fence with that one because as funny as it sounds, my mom, that's the one thing she said, if you do that, I'll pay for it. I'll pay the dues. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, that's a big piece of it, but I'm not sure I want to be in that. And not because there of anything wrong with the shrine. I just don't feel it's something that's going to provide me with what I'm looking for right now.
Doesn't float your goat.
Right. That's right.
Nice. Jason, you were going to say something.
I was. Actually, yeah. Just circling back around to what Robert was talking about with your rate of investment and your rate of return. Don't let anybody give you a guilt trip or berate you for critically evaluating the rate of return you're getting on your Masonic activities. If you go to this appendant body or this specific lodge or whatever meeting and it's poorly run, it goes on for 4 hours with no content, you have Masons there who are hostile, or there are other things that make going to that particular body's meeting or being involved in that body a chore, either find another body to go to, another council, another lodge, another chapter, or devote your time to a part of Masonry that gives you much more personal and professional satisfaction.
Wait, no. No, you can't do that. You have to work to change it.
That's right. Well, why don't you volunteer then? And why don't you
volunteer? You go in and change it.
Well, be the change you want to see.
There's an old saying, really old, that says, winners never quit and quitters never win. But those who never win and never quit are idiots.
Can
we put it on?
I mean, the fact of the matter is you need to have a good, healthy representation of what you can and can't change and what you can and can't live with. And if you can't change something and you can't live with that as the status quo, then it's time to find something else.
Absolutely. And to that point, so as a district deputy, I get emails all the time when we have these web inquiries. They get shot to one guy, then they get dispersed. And we're supposed to be actively involved with assisting a web inquiry with finding a lodge. And typically it's like, oh, he's close to this one. And when I call these guys, I don't just say, hey, here's the lodge. I call them and say, here's this lodge, and here's this lodge. This is when this one meets, and this one meets. And if you want me to, I will go there with you and introduce you to everybody. And this is the reason is that guy should acclimate himself to get to know at least maybe 3 different lodges, see where he fits. Because then the chances are he'll be a better fit for one of them, and he won't come back with these kind of feelings like, I put in way more than I get, right? Or I watch your show and I hear you guys talk about education or whatever, and I go to this lodge and they laughed me out of the room when I said, did we have an education officer or whatever? It happens. And that I'm not gonna go into a diatribe about it, but that's a shame. And that's an element of fulfillment. I hate quoting people who are still alive. I really hate it. But
What about quoting yourself?
Don't even get me started. But Robert Hurd said something that was, painfully simple one time, but it really sticks, right? And it's something like, fulfill your members and they'll fill your lodge. And that's true. So work on these fulfillment efforts. I mean, this is primarily the reason why people say no, right? I stepped also out of the Scottish Rite Northern jurisdiction recently. I maintain my membership in the Southern jurisdiction because I'm not fulfilled in the Northern jurisdiction as it pertains to what I'm looking for in the Scottish Rite, which is the College of Freemasonry. I get the education, the fulfillment in St. Louis in the Southern jurisdiction. So it's about what you're comfortable with and like you said, don't let anybody ever give you this guilt trip, because that's like, to me, the equivalent of saying, I'm here and you have to be stuck here with me. And I'm not cool with that.
You shouldn't have to embrace the suck when it comes to Masonry.
Embrace the suck. Well, if you want to be the change, then start your own lodge.
That's what a friend of mine did. He started a TO. Well, it's not an official TO lodge, but they're TO in their practices.
Arts and Sciences.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that, and they were formed because some brothers just weren't happy with their lodges, and this is what they wanted. And Arts and Sciences is, I've been there. It's a nice, it's a nice group. It's also a very well done lodge. So it's
there you go. It's not just no, but it could be a path to a better yes.
Right.
With that, let's go see what's going on social media. Mr. Richards.
All right. So before we go to social media, I'm going to talk about what I'm giving up next year.
What are you giving up for Lent? I mean, for Masonry.
I usually give up Lent for Lent, but one of the things that I'm going to work very, very hard on for next year is pulling back from just about everything, to be honest, except for the Masonic Roundtable, because I'm finding, way far and above everything else, a good rate of investment, a good rate of return on my work with TMR. That includes, being lodge instructor of work. Like I was asked to be the LIW next year, and I had originally said yes, and that was several months ago, but they circled back around to me again last month, and I said, you know what, I just don't think I have it in me. My wife has been very accommodating this year, and my goal is to be as accommodating back to her next year as I can be. So I'm gonna keep my membership in AMD and chapter, but I'm not going to be going into officers lines for those. I'm going to try to do a little bit more with Colonial Lodge in DC, because I haven't been able to make it out to any of their meetings yet. But I'm going to scale way back just to make sure that I'm giving enough time to my family. And again, TMR is something that's fun that I get a lot out of. Now we'll go to social media.
Good
that we're going to social media,
and good that we're not losing you.
Yes. No, so the memes have been relatively strong tonight. So I'm gonna start off with brother Greg Martin, who says, bro, how about no?
In there.
Yeah. Brother Nathan Rolifson says, no can refer to no, we've always done it that way. No, we never did that before. No can sometimes be the hardest response for Freemasons. No, thank you for asking me to join X, but I'm not interested or can't do it at this time. no, thank you for asking me to serve as Y, but I can't. And I think, for Freemasons, we're very inherently invested in the fraternity, and it really does hurt on some level whenever we have to say no, because we want to be able to do everything.
Well, and that's it. I mean, I heard something years ago that Masons are more susceptible to scams, especially if they come from someone who claims to be a Mason, because we're like, okay, sure, brotherly love, I'm all for that. Like, what? I'm a bad Mason if I don't. And I think part of that is also true when any Mason asks you a favor specifically of being committed in another Masonic obligation. You're like, well, I don't want to say no because I don't want to hurt his feelings. And so I think that's the nature of who we are and who we what kind of lessons we inculcate.
Usually for me, I just have to own up to the fact that I'm busy already. And I love the line, and I say it all the time, and the context is always perfect. The cable guy, when Matthew Broderick looks at Jim Carrey and says, I just don't have any more room in my life for any more friends right now. and that's me with like everything. And it's usually just because I'm selfish and busy and lazy.
I don't need another friend. So Brother Mike Overturf gives us what I think is really, really solid advice. And he simply says, pick your passion and work it. And that's I think, some of the best advice that you can take and run with as a Freemason.
Definitely. Overturf is I'll actually have the great distinct pleasure of working with him in Illinois Masonry. And he is newer, and he brings like this really refreshing perspective. So thanks, Mike.
Great. Okay, let's start wrapping things up, starting with our eager intern, Mike the intern.
So yeah, for me right now, no is not something I need to say. I've said one little thing on it. And yeah, I'm taking the passion where it takes me. So hoping to get a few more bodies underway in the near future, but we'll see where that goes. Anyway, that's really about all I have to say about saying no at this point.
Say no more. Thank you, Mike. Robert Johnson.
So if you have to say no, then say no. Don't feel guilty about it. Weigh your options. Look at what you get out of it. Follow your passion, as Brother Overturf has stated, and don't feel guilty. Just follow your heart, your dreams, why you joined the fraternity. Constantly look at why you joined and follow that path. Because for me, I have always been about education, and I followed that, becoming our lodge's first education officer. And then I was the district education officer for 2 years. And I'm an okay administrator. I'm a pretty good project manager. But at heart, I love education, and that's where I've always been. And it's a pleasure to be able to work with, on our education committee here in the state of Illinois. And that's where my passion lies. And that's another part of the reason why I'm stepping down from certain things, is because I feel like it's at a point, free plug for a terrible piece I did years ago. I think my first piece on Midnight Freemasons was, the best restaurants have small menus. And the gist of the piece was essentially that you go to your typical greasy spoon restaurant and there's everything on the menu, and everything on it you can make at home and you can make it better. You go to a nice restaurant, there are 3 things on the menu and they're all fantastic. And that's kind of the thing, is my focus. So my focus primarily is Whence Came You, TMR, District Deputy Grand Master, and Secretary of my lodge. Those are essentially where my priorities lie. I don't really put anything above anything else. They're all at the same level, but I think that's a really good scope. And I think that my new commitments that are coming up this year, be working again, like I said, with the education committee. I want to make sure I'm going to be able to give 110% to that. And so that's why I'll be kind of stepping down and lessening some of the things that I do. And hopefully other people will pick up that slack. And essentially a lot of the things that we do, right, are other people's jobs. And we think that if we just stop doing them, then they won't get done. And so if they don't get done, then there's a failure. And then do we own that or what? But we can't be afraid of that. So follow your passions. I've rambled long enough. Sorry.
Good stuff. Thank you, Robert. Jason Richards.
All right. So I've talked quite a bit already in this episode, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Do what you're passionate about and manage your time effectively. And ultimately, when it comes to Masonry, yeah, a lot of what you get out of it is what you put in. But if that's not the case, you owe it to yourself, the other people in your life, and the fraternity to do a really hard cost-benefit analysis and vote with your feet.
There you go.
Simple as that.
All right. Thank you, Jason. All right. Wrapping up. Let's see. Masonry. It's a family organization, which is why you'll be out 3 nights a week for a volunteer organization. But when you decide to say no, the good news is Masonry will be there. If my projections are accurate, it'll only be around for another 20 years, but it can be no for now, and you can come back later. So just be wise about how you want to do that, making sure that, your dues are in order and that kind of thing, because you don't want to come back, 10 years later and owe 10 years worth of dues. But as we talked about tonight, we really kind of all came to the same conclusion that do the math. What is a return on investment? What are you getting out of Freemasonry? And that also can mean just saying no to one area and moving over laterally to another. We talked a little bit about you can go after, if you're not finding what you're finding in a lodge, you can actually, in many instances, move to another lodge in that state. So that way you even just within your blue lodge, you can transfer into a membership into a different place. So you can say no to one and yes to another. So be creative. Again, don't get stuck in your old ways. So hopefully you found what you're looking for, but remember, you can use that lost word in Masonry. With that, thanks for watching. Keep searching for more light. Have a good night.